Welcome to the Word for 2021. Today we're in Judges chapter 9. The Bible does not hide the real-life exploits of people. Sometimes what is written here in Scripture, it can be disturbing. Sin is not glossed over. Sometimes it is exposed in very gory detail, like what we're going to be reading later in Judges chapter 19. But here in chapter 9, ruthless revenge and unabated ambition is on display. Going back into chapter 8, it's sad to also realize that even though Gideon started out well, he ended in trouble. In chapter 8, verse 27, you might have read that yesterday, it says that Gideon made a gold ephod and placed it in his hometown where all Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. At the end of chapter 8, we read that Gideon had many wives and he had 70 sons. He had one concubine who had a son, and his name was Abimelech. Now, here in chapter 9, Abimelech wants to become king. So what does he do? He murders 69 of his 70 brothers. The youngest brother, Jotham, he is able to escape. Then Abimelech hires 70 men to be agitators, troublemakers, or tormentors. Now, just as Abimelech is about to be crowned king, Jotham, that younger brother that was able to escape, he climbed atop Mount Gerizim, and then he shouts down to the people of Shechem, and he gives them a challenge and a curse. Then, because of Abimelech, he flees and he hides. Then in verse 22, after Abimelech has ruled for 3 years, we read that God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem. Because of that, anarchy then ensued. Robbery and violence, they were the norm. Ambushes were set and people were tormented. The town was eventually destroyed. And then even 1,000 people are destroyed by Abimelech as he sets a tower on fire with them inside. In verse 52, at the end of Abimelech's life, he stormed another tower, but this time a woman dropped a millstone on his head and cracked his skull. Not wanting to be known that he was killed by a woman, he went to his armor bearer and said, "Run me through with your sword." And that's how Abimelech died. In verse 56, at the very end of the chapter, thus God repaid the wickedness of Abimelech, and God made the men of Shechem pay for all of their wickedness. The curse of Jotham came on them. With such a tragic and treachery-filled account, what do we learn from such a chapter? Well, one thing is the truth that we understand from Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. I really appreciate the way devotional writer Wendy Blight put it. She said, when we choose to walk in disobedience, driven by pride or self-satisfaction, and ignore God's spoken truths, there will be significant consequences. We will reap what we sow. Also in this chapter, we understand that when people turn away from God, He will give them leaders that will ultimately bring hatred, division, and destruction. As we read a chapter like this, it's hard to turn anything and be positive. But one thing that we understand is that God is patient, and He will allow people's choices to play out. And what is sown will be reaped. Thank you for joining the Word for 2021.